Before history learned to count years, before laws were written, and long before gods were imagined as distant and all-powerful, there was a simpler and more unsettling idea: that the universe runs on limits. 5,000 years ago, people living between two unpredictable rivers believed that order did not come from chaos, it came from agreement. From a high council that decided how much growth was enough, how much power was too much, and when the world itself needed to rest. They called that council the Anunnaki. This is not a story about aliens or lost technology. It is a story about work, memory, justice, and why the oldest myths were less about escape and more about learning how to live together without breaking the world. Good evening, and welcome back to Noctivara Stories. Tonight, we step into one of humanity's oldest remembered worlds, a chapter written long before history learned to speak aloud. Our journey leads us to the Anunnaki, figures born from clay tablets, river mud, and the first cities ever built by human hands. If the name is unfamiliar, the Anunnaki were a collective of divine beings first recorded in Mesopotamia more than 4,000 years ago. Their presence appears in creation hymns, epic poetry, temple records, and royal inscriptions. For the people of Sumer and Akkad, they were not distant abstractions. They formed the invisible framework that held the universe together. What makes the Anunnaki especially compelling is how often they have been reimagined. Babylonian tradition recast them as attendants and judges beneath gods like Marduk and Ishtar. Assyrian texts assigned them new responsibilities within the cosmic order. And in much more recent times, modern writers have drawn them into theories of forgotten civilizations and visitors from beyond the earth. Few mythic figures have traveled so far, from riverbank shrines to speculative bookshelves. Wherever you're listening from tonight, whether you're preparing for sleep or simply following curiosity into the deep past, I'm glad you're here. Let us begin. To imagine the birth of cities, forget marble temples and orderly streets. Picture instead a wide, low plain where the Tigris and Euphrates slow and spread, depositing shimmering layers of fertile mud. This land, now southern Iraq, was shaped by water that refused to be predictable. Some years the floods nourished the fields. Other years they erased them. Survival demanded invention. People learned to guide water through channels and embankments, shaping the rivers as much as the rivers shaped them. From this struggle emerged something unprecedented. Small settlements of reed huts grew into towns, and towns into cities, bound together by canals, storehouses, and temples. This was Sumer. Archaeologists divide Sumer's early history into chapters, like a careful book written in earth and time. During the Ubaid period, early temples appeared alongside painted pottery and organized irrigation. Then came the Uruk period, beginning in the 4th millennium BCE, when the first true metropolis took shape. Uruk itself became astonishingly large for its age, home to tens of thousands of people. Only generations earlier, their ancestors had lived close to the marshes, hunting and gathering at the water's edge. Now, Uruk had neighborhoods, workshops, administrative buildings, and vast temple complexes. Brick platforms rose above the plain in layered terraces. The city hummed with labor. At its heart stood sacred precincts devoted to Inanna, goddess of love, war, and civic power, and to En, the sky god whose name would echo for millennia. A whitewashed temple caught sunlight from miles away. Processions climbed its steps bearing barley, beer, and dates. Priests tended fires and pressed signs into damp clay. The sounds of industry filled the air, kilns roaring, millstones grinding, animals calling in palm-shaded lanes. Here, writing began to resemble writing. Earlier generations had used clay tokens to count goods. In Uruk, Officials pressed wedge-shaped marks into tablets with cut reeds. At first, these were lists, rations, deliveries, inventories. Soon they recorded names, places, actions. Cuneiform was born, evolving from accounting into literature, law, and myth. Within centuries, scribes moved from counting sheep to preserving hymns and royal memory. The Sumerian world revolved around the temple. It controlled land, water, herds, and labor. Bear rations flowed from its storehouses. To manage this system, hierarchy emerged. The Ensi governed as steward of the god. The Lugal, the great man, ruled in war and diplomacy, speaking to the divine on behalf of the city. Councils debated canal repairs and border disputes. Civilization learned its rhythm. Other cities rose along the rivers. Nippur became the spiritual center, home to Enlil's great temple. Eridu claimed the oldest sacred lineage, near the meeting of fresh and salt water. Lagash recorded legal reforms and land surveys. Kish guarded the northern approaches, appearing repeatedly in royal lists. Each city had its role, its god, its place in the pattern. Sumer lacked stone, timber, and metal, but it desired them all. Trade routes stretched outward by river and sea. Copper arrived from Oman. Lapis lazuli traveled from distant mountains far to the east. Cedar floated down from the Levant. In return, Sumer sent textiles, food, and crafted goods. It was the earliest compounding economy we know. Religion infused every task. Each city honored a patron deity. Inanna in Uruk, Enki in Eridu, Nana, the moon god, Enlil in Nippur, dispenser of authority. Offerings were not symbolic gestures, they were necessities. The gods were believed to sustain the world through favor and judgment. Festivals filled streets with song and procession, marking seasons and success. Within this world emerged the idea of a divine council, the Anunnaki. At first, the name referred broadly to the highest gods, not a fixed roster. What mattered was the belief that existence was ordered, overseen by powerful beings who assigned roles to gods and humans alike. Just as temple administrators divided water and land, the Anunnaki divided fate and domain on a cosmic scale. Art reflected this vision. Cylinder seals show gods bestowing authority, banquets of immortals, rivers flowing from divine hands. Deities resembled idealized humans because the divine was understood through familiar forms. The sun god carried justice. River gods poured water. Meaning followed daily life. Law and memory followed close behind. Tablets recorded loans, oaths, boundaries, and contracts. Writing became something society trusted. War came too, over canals, fields, and borders. Brick walls rose. Victory stele recorded reclaimed ditches with surveyor's precision. Control of water meant control of life. From this matrix arose myth. Before canals, before writing, there was sky and earth united. The Sumerians called them An-Anki. Their separation created space for life. From them came a family of gods, the Anunnaki, the royal offspring of heaven and earth. At the center stood Enlil, lord of air and authority, who separated sky from land and established order. Beneath him ruled fields, storms, and cities. Below even that lay the domain of Enki, god of fresh waters, wisdom, and craft, the problem solver, the planner, the quiet architect of survival. Alongside them stood Ninhursag, the great mother of growth and birth. Together, they formed the first divine household, a council whose decisions shaped rivers, kings, and destiny itself. In some traditions, she appears as the very first mother figure to step forward with a personal name. In others, she stands as an independent goddess of creation, working alongside Enki whenever life requires careful shaping. When Sumerian stories speak of humanity being formed from clay, Ninhursag is often imagined beside the creator, steady-handed, patient, and precise. She represents not inspiration, but endurance, the quiet strength needed to bring life into being. Around these central figures gathered the other children of the sky. Nana, called Sin in later Akkadian tradition, was the moon god whose luminous vessel crossed the darkness each night. His great temple rose at Yor, and his priests measured the passage of months by watching the steady rhythm of his light. Through him, time itself became visible. Utu, later known as Shamash, was both sun and judge. His radiance revealed what was hidden, and for that reason justice belonged to him. At Sippar and Lhasa, his temples linked law to daylight, reminding people that truth, like the sun, could not be concealed forever. Inanna, called Ishtar in later ages, embodied the fierce intensity of life itself. Love, desire, ambition, and war all flowed through her. Her temple district in Uruk was renowned for ceremony, music, and splendor. Wealth gathered there, but so did danger. Inanna was the spark that ignited both union and conflict. Each of these gods belonged to the highest divine family. Each ruled over a domain that mirrored something essential in everyday Sumerian existence. Taken together, they formed not a random collection, but a carefully balanced system. If you step back and observe how these stories function, a deliberate design becomes clear. The divine family serves simultaneously as a map of the natural world and as a model of governance. The sky stands above as a distant figurehead who rarely intervenes. Enlil governs the middle realm with authority and command. Enki advises, invents, and repairs what rigid power threatens to break. Ninhursag gives form, growth, and resilience. The younger gods carry out tasks aligned with their nature. Utu brings justice because light reveals and clarifies. Nana marks time because the moon offers a visible, dependable clock. Inanna governs passion and violence because both arise from the same burning force of life. The pantheon is not merely a list of names. It is a working diagram. The word Anunnaki does not point to a single fixed roster. In some texts, 7 gods are named as the most senior. In others, the term expands to include a broader assembly. What remains constant is the idea of a high court, a gathering of the greatest powers who assign destinies. When a text says that the Anunnaki sat in council, it means that the highest authorities met and issued a binding decision. The Sumerians imagined this council convening at Nippur, Enlil's sacred city, where kings traveled to receive confirmation of their rule. A ruler became legitimate not by force alone, but when the cosmic administration agreed. Art reinforces this vision. Horned crowns mark divinity. The rod and ring held by a god symbolize measured authority. Cylinder seals depict seated deities, granting these symbols to human officials who approach with humility, eyes lowered, hands clean. The same grammar of rank and delegation appears in temple records and land surveys. The cosmos, like the city, is ordered. Power is assigned. Duties fit seasons and skills. Sumerian hymns often speak of the Mi, divine ordinances that govern both culture and nature. These include kingship, temple building, music, weaving, truth, victory, and even conflict. Civilization itself is composed of these elements. In one well-known myth, Enki gathers the Mi in his shrine at Eridu. Inanna visits him and, through clever persuasion, carries many of them back to Uruk. The story is playful in tone, but its message is serious. Civilized life depends on an organized set of powers that the gods control and distribute. Judgment also had its place in this order. Fate, once declared by the council, was considered fixed. Enlil is often named as the one who decrees destinies, though other texts credit the entire assembly. Stability in the mythic universe did not come from constant intervention, but from agreement among the highest beings about how the world should run. Geography anchored theology. Nippur was the seat of authority. Eridu held the sweet waters and the source of wisdom. Ur measured time through the moon. Uruk bound beauty and power to civic life. Sitpar and Lhasa tied sunlight to law. Mapping these cities was, in effect, mapping the body of the pantheon across the land. One striking feature of the Anunnaki is how human they seem without losing majesty. They eat offerings, wear robes, ride in processions, take offense, and reconcile. They resemble a royal household whose moods ripple outward into the lives of ordinary people. This was not a failure of imagination. It was a choice. A farmer needed a god who could listen. A king needed a council that could decide. To encounter the Anunnaki during an ordinary working day, one would begin at Nippur, not as an archaeological site, but as a living city beside a canal. Imagine wide courtyards of packed clay, doorways framed with cedar, and a great terrace lifting Enlil's temple above the plain. Priests crossed the courts with bundles of reeds. Scribes pressed tablets against their thighs. Messengers carried sealed jars of oil for lamps and offerings. Nippur was not merely a city. It was the junction between earth and the unseen. The Anunnaki ruled collectively. They did not govern by whim. They assembled, deliberated, and decreed. Destiny was the word that appears again and again. A king who prospered was one whose fate had been approved. A king who struggled had lost favor. A river that spared a district from flood did so because the council had spoken. The Sumerians' love of lists shaped their theology. The me appear again and again as the building blocks of culture. In another myth, Enki travels through the lands assigning responsibilities to different gods, rivers, fields, marshes, and mountains, each receiving a guardian suited to the task. A well-ordered cosmos, they believed, was the only kind humans could survive within. When a new ruler took power, recognition mattered as much as conquest. He came to Nippur to have his fate fixed. Processions followed. Oaths were sworn. Seals show a god handing the rod and ring to a human figure. Authority, the image tells us, is measured and granted, not seized. The Anunnaki were imagined as vividly present. Artists carved them with horned crowns, long beards, and patterned garments. Some images suggest a radiant force, melam, a presence so intense it caused awe and trembling. Yet they remained approachable enough for everyday ritual. A farmer could pour beer at a small shrine and believe the highest powers still heard him. There was no single cult devoted to the Anunnaki as a whole. Worship centered on individual gods in their cities. But the collective name mattered in oaths and treaties. To swear before the Anunnaki was to summon the entire divine court as witness. Break such an oath, and you insulted not one god, but the whole assembly. Divination grew from this belief in decisions made above. If destinies were set, then signs must exist. Priests studied oil on water, stars in the sky, and marks on sacrificial livers. These practices were systematic, recorded, compared. Omen series linked celestial events to earthly outcomes. Tablets carefully noted dates, observations, and fulfilled vows. Foundation deposits placed beneath new walls contained prayers and small offerings, asking the gods to co-sign human labor. Work and faith moved together. You built, and then you asked the court to approve. Ritual time followed the same logic. New moons marked beginnings. Harvests brought celebration. Lean years brought lament. Later traditions would magnify these rites into grand festivals, but their roots lay in Sumer, where public life and divine favor moved in rhythm. The stories do not present the council as calm and unchanging. Enlil is stern. Enki tempers harsh decrees with wisdom. Inanna pushes boundaries and forces change. Through these tensions, the myths explore how order, mercy, and vitality coexist. Two realities made the council indispensable. The land itself was unstable, rivers shifted, droughts came, rivals watched closely. And the economy depended on collective effort. If leaders could say that the Anunnaki approved a decision, people were more likely to accept hardship. There was also sorrow in this worldview. When a city fell, poets wrote laments saying its god had departed. Statues were carried away. Streets fell silent. Recovery meant rebuilding, restoring worship, and waiting for the council's verdict to change. Later myths introduced the idea of a tablet of destinies. When it was stolen, chaos followed. When it was restored, order returned. The message was simple. Authority fixes the world in place. The Anunnaki were not storms or sudden miracles. They were the architecture beneath events, the structure that shaped years and harvests, journeys and wars. Their decisions were read in the sky, in the fields, in the safe return of a caravan, and in the quiet success of an ordinary day. Their gods were never meant to be distant abstractions. Authority, in the Sumerian mind, needed to be visible, structured, and accountable. Horned crowns marked status not for spectacle, but for clarity. Power was portioned, measured, and distributed, because power without limits was chaos, not order. To a Sumerian, these ideas were as tangible as damp clay beneath the fingers or the steady rhythm of a millstone turning grain into bread. The gods were not imagined as idle rulers seated eternally above the clouds. They were assigned duties. They were expected to work. And just as importantly, their labor was recorded in stories. Stories meant not to astonish, but to explain. The tablets they left behind describe a universe that runs on schedules, responsibilities, and careful delegation. Myth, here, functions like a ledger of existence. A fitting place to begin is a composition scholars now call Enki and the Ordering of the World. It reads less like an epic and more like a guided inspection. Enki departs from his city, Eridu, and as he travels, he organizes reality itself. Marshlands are given stewards and reeds. Rivers receive guardians to watch their flow. Deities are appointed over grain, livestock, carpentry, metalwork, weaving, and trade. Mountains are assigned overseers. Coastlines are brought under watch. The cosmos is treated almost like an irrigation network, complex, fragile, and utterly dependent on competent management. Enki appears not as a thunder-wielding monarch, but as a chief engineer with an intuitive sense for matching ability to responsibility. In a land where a single misjudged canal could doom an entire harvest, this vision of divine competence was deeply reassuring. This same logic shapes another foundational myth, the story of the me. These are not physical objects, but divine ordinances, the essential frameworks of civilized life. Music, writing, kingship, truth, craftsmanship, law, rivalry, even conflict itself are all included. Civilization is not accidental, it is assigned. In one of the most vivid episodes, Inanna visits Enki at Eridu. Through charm, persistence, and perhaps calculated intoxication, she convinces him to load the me onto a boat. When Enki awakens and realizes what has happened, He dispatches various creatures to stop her journey. They fail. Inanna arrives safely in Uruk, and the city flourishes with new arts, institutions, and social order. There is no thunder, no war, only logistics. Culture arrives like cargo, and people set to work. Kingship, too, required divine validation. The Sumerian king list provides it in stark, methodical prose. It declares that kingship descended from heaven, then traces its movement from city to city across immense spans of time. Before the flood, authority rests successively in Eridu, Batibira, Larik, Sippar, and Shuruppak. After the flood, it emerges anew at Kish. This is not history as we define it today, but it reveals how political change was understood. When a city rose, it was because authority had been granted. When it fell, that authority had simply moved on. The Anunnaki are not named as characters in this list, yet their presence is implicit throughout. Authority is never owned, only borrowed. Order flows downward. In longer narrative poems, the Anunnaki appear at pivotal moments, often silently yet decisively. The most famous example lies within the Epic of Gilgamesh. An ancient survivor recounts a flood that destroyed the world, not as an accident of nature, but as a deliberate decision. Humanity had grown too loud, too disruptive. The gods agreed to silence them. One man survives, warned by a sympathetic deity, and builds a vessel. When the waters recede, he offers sacrifice. The gods gather around the smoke like flies. The text remarks, an image both vivid and faintly ironic. Deprived of offerings, the gods have suffered too. The bond between heaven and earth is transactional. Humans sustain the gods through ritual. The gods sustain the world through order. When that balance breaks, everyone feels the cost. Justice, too, operates within this system. Utu, known later as Shamash, is the divine judge. He traverses the sky, seeing what humans do when they believe themselves unseen. In art, he emerges through the gates of the horizon at dawn, carrying the symbols of judgment. Oaths sworn beside canals or in temple courts are witnessed not only by people, but by Utu and the Anunnaki themselves. The clay tablet records the promise on earth. The divine court records it beyond alteration. Some myths show this court in its most severe form. In the descent of Inanna, the goddess enters the underworld ruled by her sister Ereshkigal. She passes through 7 gates, surrendering her regalia piece by piece. At the deepest level, she stands before 7 Anunnaki judges. They do not debate. They pronounce judgment. Inanna is struck down and suspended, lifeless. Only a carefully negotiated rescue restores her. The lesson is unmistakable. Law exists below as well as above, and the same ancient powers oversee both realms. Temple building forms another strand of divine duty. The ruler Gudea of Lagash recorded detailed accounts of dreams in which gods instructed him to rebuild sacred spaces. He describes exact measurements, materials, and rituals, calling upon the great gods to approve each step. Similar inscriptions appear across Mesopotamia. Construction is never merely political, it is presented as obedience to divine planning. The Anunnaki are the final authority. When they approve, walls endure. Even everyday morality is shaped by divine expectation. Texts like the instructions of Shuruppak offer practical advice. Respect boundaries, maintain canals, treat others justly, choose trustworthy companions. These are not dramatic commandments, yet they carry the weight of the earliest age, when wisdom flowed directly from the gods. Disorder offends the divine. Carelessness threatens the whole community. Military tales follow the same pattern. In Enmakar and the Lord of Aratta, Success depends not on force alone, but on divine favor, clever speech, and ritual legitimacy. Language itself becomes a divine tool. One version even hints that human speech was once unified, until a god altered it. The message remains consistent. Cities rise or fall depending on whether their patron deities can persuade the cosmic council. Lists of offerings reinforce this worldview with relentless detail. Barley, beer, bread, livestock, perfumes, carefully tallied, day by day. The implication is simple. Order must be maintained. When disaster strikes, one does not accuse the gods. One responds with offerings, laments, and appeals. Divination texts complete the picture. Omen manuals catalog signs in sheep livers and stars with almost scientific patience. Patterns are observed, recorded, compared. Belief here is not theatrical, it is administrative. Fate leaves traces, and humans are expected to read them. In later centuries, newer gods would take center stage, and the Anunnaki would be portrayed as vast assemblies of elders. Yet their role never disappears. They assign destinies, approve rulers, judge lives, and judge deaths. Their work is not spectacle. It is governance. And this brings us to their most consequential decision of all. The gods needed workers. After heaven and earth were separated, the world required endless labor. Canals had to be dug, fields tended, temples raised. The junior gods, tasked with this burden, endured for ages. But eventually, exhaustion turned into rebellion. In the poem known as Atrahasis, they marched to Enlil's house, discard their tools, and refuse to continue. A divine strike. Faced with collapse, the elder gods deliberate. Enki proposes a solution both radical and enduring, the creation of a new being, capable of understanding, learning, obeying, and sustaining ritual order. Clay from the life-giving earth is mixed with divine essence. A god is sacrificed not merely as punishment, but as purpose. Birth goddesses shape the forms. Time passes. The calendar is observed. When the first humans emerge, there is no ceremony. They are immediately assigned tasks. They will carry the baskets, dig the canals, maintain the temples. In return, they will receive rations, clothing, and protection. Humanity is born not as rulers of the world, but as its caretakers, standing between earth and heaven, keeping the system alive. The tablets fall silent here, but the implication endures. And so the story continues. The new beings step fully into the intricate system that Sumer had already imagined. Clay tablets begin to follow clay bodies as they work. Lists of hands, days, rations, and tasks. Creation does not end with breath, it continues with administration. Throughout this unfolding world, Enki does not behave like a distant architect who walks away once the structure stands. He remains present as a patron who wants the design to endure. Knowledge is given gradually. Tools are introduced before mastery is expected. Brickmaking is taught alongside the wisdom of laying reed mats beneath foundations so walls will not crack. Boats are shaped to fit the bends of canals, not the open sea. Enki explains how fresh water must be guided into fields while salt is allowed to wash away, preserving the soil for generations. In quieter lines, he arranges that midwives will learn their craft, that women will understand the rhythms of birth, and that children may enter the world with care rather than fear. Survival here is practical, not poetic. Ninhursag, also called Nintu, the mother of humankind, is not a distant symbol. She feels the weight of the new order. When death enters the story, she mourns. When balance returns, she rejoices. In one telling, She measures the span of a human life and records it on a small tablet of fate. Mortality is not framed solely as punishment. It is described as a limit that makes a crowded world workable. Without boundaries, abundance becomes collapse. The gods learn this alongside humans. Limits, the stories suggest, can be a form of mercy. Behind these myths, real labor leaves its imprint. Canals erode when floods chew through their banks. Salt creeps into the soil and poisons fields for years. The stories do not scold. They explain. Humanity was created not to dominate the world, but to share responsibility for maintaining it. The gods keep the authority of decree. People shoulder the daily work of care. Each time a scribe lists a dredging crew or a builder lays a reed mat beneath fresh brick, the logic of the myth quietly proves itself true. The Atrahasis tablets that survive today are school copies, written centuries later in places like Sippar and Ashur. They preserve older Sumerian ideas in Akkadian language. The narrative moves calmly, from revolt to solution to creation to consequence. Even the detail of divine blood mixed into clay is not meant for shock. It explains why humans can understand instructions, negotiate duties, and speak to the gods. Intelligence and authority are part of the mixture. Art reinforces the message. Reliefs show lines of labors with baskets balanced on aching shoulders. Cylinder seals depict boats gliding through canals and oxen led toward threshing floors. Early law codes from cities like Ur and Ishnuna punish those who neglect canals or shift boundary stones to steal water. Myth and law speak with one voice. Water management is sacred work because the gods placed it in human hands. There is also a restrained humor woven through the tradition. When the younger gods abandon their tools, the narrator hints that even immortals reach exhaustion, and that admitting limits is not failure. When humans begin offering sacrifices, the gods respond like officials who have waited too long for a meal. These moments are not mockery. They humanize the divine household and remind us that the sacred is not always distant thunder. The most serious consequence of the new arrangement appears later, but its shadow stretches back across the creation scene. As humanity thrives, its noise and smoke rise skyward. Some of the great gods grow irritated. The council debates population and restraint. Enki continues to search for humane solutions while others lose patience. This tension leads directly into the flood story, a tale of near-erasure and uneasy mercy. The oldest flood narratives do not begin with lightning or wrath. They begin with the complaint. Humanity has multiplied. Its clamor fills the night like insects in a summer marsh. Enlil, who values order and quiet, declares the world unmanageable. The council meets, and what follows feels less like mythic rage than policy. First comes plague. When that fails, famine. When famine fades, drought. Each measure is meant to reduce pressure without total destruction. Each time, Enki intervenes quietly. He advises offerings to ease disease. He suggests new food sources during famine. He teaches people how to dig deeper when canals run dry. Ingenuity and compassion blunt every attempt. Finally, Enlil proposes a flood, a reset that will cleanse the land completely. The council agrees. An oath of silence is sworn. No god is to warn humanity. Enki finds a way through the oath without breaking it. He speaks not to a man, but to the wall of a reed house in Shurupak. Wall, listen, he says. The wall listens. The man inside hears. In Akkadian, he is Atrahasis. In older Sumerian tradition, Ziusudra. Later, he will be known as Utnapishtim. The instructions are exact. Tear down the house. Build a boat. Save life, not possessions. Load seeds, animals, craftsmen, and tools. Seal the seams with bitumen, the black pitch that bubbled from the ground near the rivers and held Mesopotamian boats together. Without it, even the strongest vessel would leak. The hero hires carpenters, rope makers, reed cutters. He pays them well. He tells the elders the work honors a god. Then the sky darkens. The storm arrives with violence that bends trees and shatters levees. In some versions it lasts 6 days and 7 nights. In others, the count differs. The result is the same. Land becomes sea. Rooftops drift and vanish. The boat survives, rocking like a basket on boiling water. As the flood rages, the gods themselves grow afraid. They huddle at the edge of the sky, startled by the force of what they have unleashed. When the waters begin to fall, the hero opens a hatch. Light returns. He releases birds, a dove, a swallow, then a raven. The raven does not return. Land has emerged. Sacrifice follows. Sweet reeds burn. Meat roasts. Drink is poured out. The gods gather around the smoke like flies. The text says, a sharp image with a deeper truth. During the flood, there were no offerings. Hunger and regret settle in. Enlil is furious to discover survivors. Enki answers calmly. There were other ways, he says. Life can be limited without being erased. New rules follow. Human lifespans shorten. Fertility is restrained. The earth is spared the weight of endless growth. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim and his wife alone receive immortality and are sent far away. It is an exception that confirms the rule. Mortality will define the human rhythm. The flood becomes a dividing line in memory. Before it, kings reign for impossible spans. After it, time feels recognizable. Archaeology finds layers of river clay at sites like Shuruppak, evidence not of a world ocean, but of devastating floods in a river plain. In such a land, one flood becomes the flood. The story travels. In the biblical tradition, Noah preserves life in a vessel and receives a promise that such destruction will not be repeated. The council of gods becomes a single judge. Yet the structure remains. A boat. A family. A restart governed by law. After the flood, religion grows more sober. Lament deepens. Kings rebuild temples to restore shaken order. Human lives shorten in the king lists. Limits become permanent. The creation story, heard again, now sounds like a warning as well as a gift. Humans were made to carry burdens. The flood is what happens when the balance strains. Still, hope remains. Enki saves a remnant. He honors skill and planning. The hero saves not only food, but tools, seeds, and knowledge. When the waters recede, the world resumes with a full kit. This is Mesopotamian hope, not that disaster will never come, but that careful preparation allows rebuilding. Civilizations do not turn pages cleanly. They smudge them, revise them, and write over old lines. Sumer fades. Babylon rises. Eridu still whispers of beginnings. Nippur still guards sacred authority. But a new center forms on the plain, and with it, a new way of telling the story of the world. And that story, too, is just beginning. He wove cities together until they resembled something new, no longer a loose collection of powers, but a kingdom in all but name. When rulers begin to build states, priests respond by shaping theologies that can hold them. In Babylon, that response took a decisive form. A local god was lifted, reshaped, and placed at the center of everything. His name was Marduk. For centuries, Marduk had existed without special brilliance. Then Babylon rose, and with it, his stature. Priests and poets set reed to clay and composed a creation epic that would define an age. We know it by its opening words, Enuma Elish. It begins not with kings or cities, but with waters, Abzu, the sweet water below, and Tiamat, the salt sea above. From their mingling, the first gods emerge. The younger gods grow restless and loud. Abzu, weary of the noise, plots to silence them. Conflict follows, and from that struggle emerges a champion destined to tame chaos. In older Sumerian traditions, such a role might belong to Enlil or Ninurta. In Babylon's retelling, Marduk steps forward. The story unfolds with confidence and spectacle. Marduk is granted authority, armed, tested. He faces Tiamat, the primordial sea who has birthed monstrous allies and set Kingu at their head. The battle ends with a certainty that feels like sunrise. Marduk defeats her, splits her body, and from it constructs the ordered world. One half becomes the sky, the other the deep. He fixes the paths of stars and planets so that time itself can be read. He establishes the calendar. He appoints winds, sets stations for the great lights, and defines a nether sea beneath a circle of lands where cities may rise. One decision in the poem reveals how Babylonians understood human purpose. The older gods complain of labor. Marduk answers in a way that echoes ancient Sumerian logic while updating it for a new age. He takes Kingu, leader of the rebellion, and from his blood fashions humankind. People will carry the work that burdens divine shoulders. They will maintain temples, canals, and city walls. They will sing, count, brew, carve, and lift. In return, they will receive law and protection. It is a contract as old as the floodplain and as fresh as Babylon's throne. Once the world is ordered and humanity set to its tasks, the epic reveals its true aim. The divine assembly proclaims Marduk king of the gods. They bestow upon him 50 names, each claiming a power once held by others. He is the establisher of decrees, the renewer, the giver of life, the conqueror of the sea, the restorer of ruined cities. He is neither Skyfather nor stern enforcer like Enlil. He is executive authority, energy paired with repair. The Anunnaki do not disappear. They expand. Where they once stood as a small circle of senior powers, they now form a vast company, sometimes counted as 300 of heaven and 300 of earth. The symmetry would have pleased Babylonian scribes. Order is visible. Hierarchy is explicit. This theology did not live only on tablets. Each spring, as fields greened and rivers settled, Babylon celebrated the New Year festival, the Akkatu. Statues of the gods processed through the streets. Priests recited Enuma Elish in halls heavy with cedar scent and lamp smoke. The king entered the great temple of Marduk, the Asagila, a complex so immense that later travelers struggled to imagine it. There, the king was humbled before being crowned. The high priest stripped him of his regalia and struck his cheek. If the king wept, the omen was favorable. The god had accepted him. His scepter was returned. The procession continued to the Akkatu house beyond the walls. The year could begin in balance. Babylon expressed its theology in brick as well as word. Near the temple rose a stepped tower later remembered as Etemenanki, the house that links heaven and earth. Its height marked an axis between ground and sky. Floods and wars destroyed it more than once. Each time, it was rebuilt. A city aligned with the cosmos could not afford to leave that axis broken. The older gods remained, reorganized rather than erased. Enki, now called Ea, continued as counselor and patron of wisdom. Inanna endured as Ishtar, brilliant, dangerous, and essential. Utu walked the sky as Shamash, bearer of light and justice. Sin marked the moon's time. Nergal and Ereshkigal ruled below. The Anunnaki still named the Great Assembly, but the center of gravity had shifted. Decision now flowed through Babylon's court. Politics reinforced the myth. Hammurabi carved his laws beneath a relief of Shamash handing him the rod and ring. Canals were dredged. Storehouses counted. Fields restored after floods. When Babylon weakened, others adopted the pattern. Kassite rulers honored Marduk. Assyrians elevated Ashur and rewrote the epic with their own champion. Yet even they restored Babylon after conquest, knowing the city carried legitimacy no army could manufacture. Texts from this era show the system at work everywhere. Incantations invoke Marduk alongside Ea. Scholars compiled omen series that treated the sky as a written page. Temple inventories grew into encyclopedias of ritual. Scribal students copied Enuma Elish and memorized the 50 names as acts of devotion. Foundation deposits buried beneath rebuilt walls credited Marduk with allowing brick and timber to meet again. The Tablet of Destinies, once a fleeting symbol, gains new clarity. In later retellings, victory returns it to its rightful holder. Without it, no command stands. Authority, the stories insist, must be recognized as legitimate. A city may win a battle yet lose the year if heaven is unconvinced. This was theology as statecraft. Marduk does not merely conquer. He organizes. He restores. He models what empire requires from its center. The priests singing his titles were instructing rulers as much as praising gods. Power is not only command. It is maintenance. Set beside older Sumerian texts, the continuity is clear. Humans are still shaped from divine blood and earth. The council still meets. The gifts that sustain culture persist, now folded into Marduk's names. Festivals once spread across many cities now converge on one. The map changes, but the landmarks remain. In daily life, this meant Babylon presented itself as the hinge of heaven and earth. Merchants passed through gates named for gods known across the Near East. Days were counted by a calendar that matched epic and sky. Disputes were sworn before Shamash and Marduk, with the Anunnaki called as witnesses. The rise of Marduk did more than elevate a patron. It offered a framework for future change. Assyrian kings borrowed its imagery. Persian administrators adopted its habits. Later scholars plotted planets using tables preserved in the same temples where the epic had been chanted. By this point, the Anunnaki had not vanished. They had moved. Once architects of fate above, they increasingly appear as judges below. The name remains. The function shifts. In Inanna's descent, 7 Anunnaki sit in judgment in the underworld. They do not negotiate. They pronounce. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, they decree death and dwell with Ereshkigal. Incantations call on them as enforcers of oaths beyond the grave. A pairing emerges in later texts. The Igigi for the open sky. The Anunnaki for the depths. It is not sudden invention, but slow sorting, an archive reshaped by empire. The heavens become a realm of signs. The underworld becomes a realm of law. The Mesopotamian afterlife was no paradise. It was a dim city where the dead lived as shades and less remembered. Gates, doorkeepers, a river, a boatman, a queen, and her court. Offerings sustained the dead. Neglect bred restless spirits. Rituals existed to send them back. Priests invoked the Anunnaki to judge such cases. Graves confirmed the logic. Rich burials carried tools, ornaments, attendants. Not excess, but preparation. The same belief that ordered heaven and empire ordered death. And so the long transformation completes itself. The Anunnaki, once the high council of the sky, become the wardens of the deep. The authority remains ancient. Only its address has changed. When Babylonians built a city, they did not think they were stacking bricks. They believed they were anchoring the universe. Power, in Mesopotamia, always needed a story to justify it. And the rise of Babylon demanded a god who could explain why this city now stood at the center of the world. That god was Marduk. For centuries, Marduk had been little more than a local deity. His name was known, but it carried no special weight. Then Babylon rose, and Marduk rose with it. Priests and poets reshaped the old traditions and composed a creation story that would define an empire. We know it by its opening words, Enuma Elish. The story begins before sky or earth existed. There was only water, fresh water below and salt water above. From their mingling, the first gods were born. But the younger gods were loud and restless. Apsu, the ancient deep, grew tired of the noise and planned to destroy them. Conflict followed. And conflict produced a champion. In older Sumerian myths, that role belonged to gods like Enlil or Ninurta. But in the Babylonian retelling, it is Marduk who steps forward. The narrative is bold and cinematic. He receives symbols of authority, tests his weapons, and faces Tiamat, the primal sea who has birthed monsters and placed Kingu at their head. The outcome is never in doubt. Marduk defeats Tiamat and splits her body in two. From one half he forms the sky, from the other, the earth. He fixes the paths of stars and planets so that time can be measured. He establishes the calendar, assigns the winds their roles, and organizes the cosmos into something legible and stable. But one decision in the poem reveals how Babylonians understood human purpose. The older gods complain that the work of maintaining the world is too heavy. Marduk answers by taking Kingu, the leader of the rebels, and from his blood he creates humankind. Humans are made to work. They will maintain temples and canals. They will repair walls, count grain, sing hymns, brew beer, and lift stone. In return, they will receive law, order, and divine protection. It is a contract as old as the river plain itself. Once the world is ordered and humanity assigned its role, the poem reaches its true goal. The divine assembly proclaims Marduk king of the gods. They grant him 50 names, each one absorbing a function once held by another deity. He is not a distant sky father. He is not the old ruler Enlil. Marduk is something new, an executive god for an age that admired energy, repair, and administration. The Anunnaki, once the highest divine family, are reorganized beneath him. Some texts count them as 300 gods of heaven and 300 of earth, a symmetry that would have pleased any Babylonian administrator. This mythology was not confined to tablets. It was performed. Each spring, as fields turned green and the rivers settled into their channels, Babylon celebrated the Akitu festival. Statues of the gods were carried through the streets. Priests recited Enuma Elish in halls thick with incense and lamplight. The king entered Marduk's great temple and underwent a ritual of humiliation, stripped of his regalia and struck until tears flowed. If the king wept, the omen was good. The god accepted him. The year could begin in order. Babylon's architecture reinforced this cosmic claim. Marduk's temple stood beside a towering step structure later remembered as the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Rebuilt again and again after floods and wars, it proclaimed that this city stood on the axis of the universe. Older gods were not erased. They were reassigned. Enki, now called Ea, remained the god of wisdom and craft. Inanna lived on as Ishtar, brilliant, dangerous, and powerful. Shamash ruled justice in daylight. Sin governed the moon. But authority now flowed through Babylon's divine court. Over time, the Anunnaki changed roles. In earlier ages, they had been the Great Council of Heaven. In later tradition, they appear as judges of the underworld. They sit in darkness, pass verdicts on the dead, and enforce oaths that were broken in life. This shift reflected a legal mindset. Justice could be delayed, but never escaped. Boundary stones, treaties, and curses all invoked the Anunnaki. If someone moved a field marker or violated an oath, the gods of the earth and sky would see, and the underworld court would finish the case. Mesopotamians did not imagine the afterlife as a place of reward. It was a shadowed city beneath the earth, ruled by Ereshkigal and her court. The dead survived on offerings from the living. Forgotten spirits became restless. Rituals existed to send them back, judged once more by the Anunnaki. Even fear was organized. 7 gates. 7 judges. 7 decrees. By the late first millennium, scribes catalogued the underworld with bureaucratic precision. Names, titles, duties, all written on clay. The Anunnaki appear not as monsters, but as senior officials in a cosmic administration. And then, the world that sustained these beliefs collapsed. Temples fell into ruin. Scripts went unread. Rivers shifted. The names of the gods faded into silence. For centuries, the stories slept beneath the soil. They were awakened in the modern age, through broken tablets, ruined libraries, and patient scholarship. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood story, the descent of Ishtar, all returned to the light. And with them, the Anunnaki re-emerged as more than myth. They were a concept, a flexible title for ultimate authority. Once in the heavens, later in the underworld. Always connected to order, law, and judgment. For nearly 2,000 years, Mesopotamians trusted that the universe, like their cities, was governed by records, decisions, and boundaries. Wherever the Anunnaki were seated, their purpose remained the same: to keep the world from slipping back into chaos. They were modest objects, often no larger than a hand, yet they carried the same message as law codes and hymns alike: authority was not chaos. It was measured, assigned, and recorded. The idea of a supreme court that set destinies was not an abstract philosophy for the people who shaped these stones and tablets. It was the framework of daily life. Not every discovery fit into a single, tidy system. For a time, scholars debated how many Anunnaki there were and which gods properly belonged to that name. Some texts spoke of hundreds divided between heaven and earth. Others described a solemn group of 7 seated as judges in the underworld. Over time, Assyriologists learned not to force one fixed list onto centuries of belief. The term Anunnaki functioned more like a title than a roster, applied differently across cities and eras. That flexibility is not a flaw. It is how living religions survive, by preserving core ideas while allowing the details to adapt. By the middle of the 20th century, the broad outlines of Mesopotamian religion were clear enough to teach with confidence. The earliest cities rose in the Ubaid period. Writing began as accounting and grew into literature. Sumerian and Akkadian existed side by side, shaping one another. The divine world mirrored civic life. The Anunnaki began as the offspring of sky and earth, became the senior assembly that fixed destinies, and later emerged as judges of the dead. The flood story traveled across cultures. The Babylonian creation epic elevated one city and one god without demolishing the older structure beneath it. The result was a network of texts and practices strong enough to endure. Outside the university, curiosity flourished as well. Museum galleries filled with visitors standing before lion reliefs and winged bulls. Translations of the Epic of Gilgamesh reached general readers. Teachers could point to a clay tablet and say, "A scribe pressed this sign 4,000 years ago, and we can still read it." On the best days, the distance between modern life and ancient cities seemed to narrow. A hymn praising a god for fresh water resonated with anyone who had watched a garden revive in summer heat. Rediscovery was never smooth. Wars interrupted excavations. Collections were scattered or damaged. Sites eroded while debates over permits dragged on. Yet the story advanced because its sources were stubborn. Clay breaks easily, but once fired, it preserves writing better than papyrus or leather. A city that burned might accidentally bake its archives. A collapsed wall could seal rooms until another age arrived to open them. Each excavation season felt less like a discovery and more like a conversation resumed. By the century's end, a reader could walk into a well-stocked library and find entire shelves devoted to Mesopotamian religion. There were bilingual editions with transliteration facing translation. Dictionaries unraveled Sumerian compounds and Akkadian verbs. Atlases traced the shifting paths of rivers. In these works, the Anunnaki stood where they belonged, not as curiosities, but as a central idea in how the first cities organized the unseen. Then came a shift. Most readers were content to admire the poetry, legal sharpness, and practicality of these ancient texts. Others wanted something more dramatic. They looked at gods descending from the sky and wondered if the sky meant more than metaphor. This is how the Anunnaki left seminar rooms and entered late-night television and popular imagination. The first wave came from writers fascinated by the idea that ancient monuments required outside assistance. In the 1960s, a Swiss author filled pages with photographs and questions. Were old carvings depictions of machines? Did myths describe technology? His books sold widely because the idea was flattering. If ancient people were guided by visitors from the stars, then humanity was part of a cosmic narrative larger than history. The Anunnaki entered center stage in the 1970s. A new interpretation claimed that the Sumerians were not writing myth at all, but history. According to this view, a wandering planet on a vast orbit, called Nibiru, brought beings who came to Earth in search of resources. These beings were identified as the Anunnaki. Humanity, the story went, was engineered from local life and divine essence to serve them. It was a compelling tale. It borrowed the language of science, planets, genetics, atmosphere repair, and blended it with theology. It also carried the thrill of secrecy. Only a few could supposedly read the tablets correctly. Millions of readers embraced the idea. Television soon followed, sweeping cameras over ziggurats while narrators suggested forgotten visitors who taught writing, law, and kingship. Alongside the spectacle, scholars returned to the tablets. They pointed out that Nibiru was a title used for celestial crossings, often associated with Jupiter. They showed that Anunnaki referred to a class of gods, not extraterrestrial travelers. Creation from clay and divine blood was explained as a ritual language of legitimacy, not laboratory notes. Astronomers reminded audiences that a massive hidden planet passing through the solar system would have left measurable effects long ago. The divide widened when dates were tied to prophecy. As 2012 approached, predictions multiplied. Astronomers responded patiently. No rogue planet appeared. The year passed. The tablets remained unchanged. The persistence of these ideas reveals something generous about human nature. People seek meaning on a grand scale. The Mesopotamians did too. They found it in councils that set fate, contracts between gods and cities, and maps where every gate had a guardian. Modern audiences sometimes replace divine will with visitors from the stars. Aliens become a substitute for gods. Rockets replace thrones. The Anunnaki adapt easily because they already carry the weight of origin stories. There is a third path between belief and debunking. It treats ancient texts as human documents worthy of care. On this path, the flood myth reflects life beside unpredictable rivers. The creation of humans to bear labor speaks honestly about societies built on organized work. The descent to the underworld shows how grief was given form and rules. The Anunnaki, here, are not spacemen. They are how cities understood power, justice, and limits. Fiction will always borrow freely, and perhaps it should. A novelist who imagines an Anunnaki remembering distant stars is working in the same spirit as a Sumerian poet who sang of a moon god crossing the night. What matters is knowing which shelf you are on. Myth invites imagination. Pseudoscience asks to be graded as fact. Some writers draw lines between the Anunnaki and later biblical figures. Ideas do travel, flood stories certainly did, but Mesopotamian gods are not simply renamed characters in later texts. They belong to a world of canals, barley fields, and baked brick. Their stories stand on their own. Return to the tablets, and they feel remarkably steady. A school text says humans were made so the gods would not dig canals. A hymn praises Enlil for setting destinies. A boundary stone calls on the Anunnaki to curse land thieves. None of these require spaceships. They require cities where work must be shared and promises must hold. In the end, the modern life of the Anunnaki splits into two branches. In one, they are administrators of a universe governed by decree, offering, and measured time. In the other, they are visitors from a distant world who shaped humanity for their own ends. One branch is supported by clay, context, and language. The other by desire and speculation. Only one of them needs a glossary. Take a familiar artifact, give it a suggestive interpretation, and let the audience connect the dots for themselves. That simple method proved powerful. Museums began to feel its effects almost immediately. A guided tour that started with irrigation in the lower rivers could, within minutes, drift into questions about hypothetical planets beyond Neptune. The past and the cosmos collapsed into the same breath. The internet multiplied this effect. Early forums became meeting grounds where people shared translations, sketches, and speculation. Amateur archivists scanned forgotten articles and uploaded them with commentary. One person quoted a line from a tablet. Another posted a satellite image of a mound in southern Iraq and asked what might still lie beneath it. Videos stitched together stock footage and opened with the phrase, "What if?" A new kind of explainer emerged, calm, persuasive voices capable of speaking for an hour in ways that felt authoritative even when evidence was thin. In these spaces, Anunnaki became a signal word. To use it was to announce a willingness to entertain expansive stories about human origins and hidden destinies. Fiction and games followed naturally. Writers are drawn to ready-made pantheons, and the name itself carries weight. Even without a map reference, Anunnaki sounds ancient and consequential. Role-playing games cast them as vanished factions whose relics still bend reality. Science fiction novels imagined dormant bases beneath ziggurats or signals waiting to awaken. Comic artists drew tall figures with horned crowns stepping out of light while humans looked on in awe. None of this claimed historical truth. It was myth at play, once released from the classroom. Music and visual art joined in. Albums borrowed the names of sky gods. Lyrics folded floods and lost cities into refrains meant to be shouted by crowds. Tattoo artists reworked cuneiform signs into clean modern lines. Murals placed winged figures beside spray-painted planets, as if insisting that the oldest stories still wanted a voice in contemporary weather. Pop culture is a net that catches what glints. The Anunnaki began to glint. Conventions gave the movement a social body. In hotel ballrooms and community halls, speakers moved from excavation photos to star charts in a single slide deck. Vendors sold replica seals, paperback books, and fragments of meteorite no larger than a fingernail. In one corner, a retired engineer explained how a reed boat might behave in floodwater. In another, a podcaster recorded an interview about a predicted return date for an object no observatory had ever tracked. It felt part science fair, part revival meeting, part book club. Most attendees came for the thrill of a story that stretched from the first cities into the far future. Museums adapted in quieter ways. Curators learned to anticipate questions that were not printed on the wall labels. They added explanations of how scribes held their reeds, why tablets fractured the way they did, and what Nibiru actually means in late astronomical lists. Descents practiced answering speculative questions without dismissiveness, gently redirecting attention to the objects themselves. Some exhibitions placed a flood tablet beside a map of ancient river channels and a photograph of a modern levee, showing that myth, environment, and memory form a braid rather than a puzzle box. Classrooms felt the ripple as well. Teachers discovered that lessons on Mesopotamia gained traction when pop culture versions were acknowledged rather than ignored. Students might read a short passage from Atrahasis and then attempt to float a small reed and paper boat carrying grain across a basin. Another lesson might involve examining a boundary stone and drafting a modern contract that echoes its language. The word Anunnaki became a doorway into the practical world of barley, brick, and debt. The more extreme corners of the web moved in darker directions. Some recast the Anunnaki as hidden rulers manipulating governments and financial systems. Others fused them with saints, demons, or secret bloodlines. The pattern is familiar. Take an old term heavy with authority, detach it from context, and let it absorb contemporary fears. In that form, the Anunnaki function as a mirror, reflecting modern suspicion more than ancient belief. Alongside this noise, a quieter current grew stronger. Independent translators published careful, side-by-side renderings of hymns. Digital humanities projects built searchable corpora where anyone could trace a word across hundreds of tablets. Documentary filmmakers followed archaeologists into the field and showed how a single square meter of soil could yield fragments that shift an entire chronology. In this work, the Anunnaki returned to their historical roles, first as the High Council that fixed destinies, later as judges of the underworld. The drama remained, but it rested on evidence that could be checked. There may be a reason the Anunnaki have secured a permanent place in modern imagination. They satisfy two desires at once. They offer the romance of the first cities, processions, towers, offerings, and they provide a flexible cosmic script that can be rewritten endlessly. They can be guardians or tyrants, teachers or creditors. That same flexibility allowed the name to survive in antiquity as its function shifted from sky to underworld. It now carries the term smoothly from footnotes into headlines and back again. The danger is confusion. The benefit is curiosity. People who might never have thought about Sumer now look up cuneiform and learn the difference between Sumerian and Akkadian. Someone drawn in by a grand mystery may stay long enough to understand why calendars mattered to farmers, how canal labor was organized, and what it meant to swear by the names of an ancient high court. If the price is one more question about a hidden planet, It is not a heavy one. The Anunnaki now live a double life. They remain, in the texts, the elders who set destinies and later sit in judgment below. They also function as symbols modern creators use to suggest depth and secrecy. One life is anchored in clay, brick, and riverland memory. The other drifts across screens and stages. Both will likely persist, because ancient stories are generous hosts and modern culture never stops looking for a stage. If you want to see how a society negotiates that tension, visit 3 places in a single afternoon. Sit in a university seminar where an Assyriologist explains how turning one wedge mark can change a word. Walk into a planetarium where astronomers show a sky filled with tracked objects and explain why hidden giants cannot sneak through unnoticed. End in a conservation lab where a specialist coaxes a new line from a broken tablet with light and patience. Between these rooms, myth is not flattened, it is given its proper scale. Scholarly skepticism begins with language. Ancient words are not riddles to be solved once and for all. They shift by era and city. Nibiru can name a crossing point in the sky or a marker planet for seasonal order. It is not a secret world hiding in the dark. Anunnaki behaves the same way. In Sumerian hymns, it names the High Assembly. In later incantations, it names judges below. Neither usage implies visitors from deep space. These are not opinions. They are patterns visible across thousands of texts read in context. Philology has a quiet elegance. Parallel passages reveal that lines about clay mixed with divine essence appear alongside rituals about birth and speech. The goal is not to mock imaginative readings, but to show that ancient authors wrote within traditions we can trace. A line does not become a laboratory report simply because it is printed in a glossy book. Archaeology adds weight to the words. Excavations at Uruk, Nippur, and Babylon reveal cycles of rebuilding, shifts in rivers, and rooms filled with ordinary tools. Foundation deposits ask the old high court to guard new walls. Boundary stones summon that same court to punish trespass. The material record explains why gods were asked to watch canals and enforce property. It does not conceal landing pads or machinery. Astronomy closes the door on the largest modern claims. The solar system has been surveyed by professionals and amateurs alike. Large bodies announce themselves through gravity and light. When predictions of a hidden giant arise, astronomers measure rather than mock. The measurements return empty. The real sky remains astonishing enough. Comets flare, eclipses tick like clocks, and planets dance with mathematical grace. None of this diminishes the myths. The flood story is not a forecast, but it preserves the memory of living beside dangerous rivers. The creation of humans to carry baskets is not biology, but it is honest about labor and survival. The descent to the underworld does not map the dead, but it gives shape to grief and remembrance. A myth holds wisdom when it stays where it belongs. Even scholarship remains provisional. New tablet joins correct old readings. Interpretations shift. Where scholars once spoke of fixed pantheons, they now describe divine households that change by city and century, explaining how a name like Anunnaki could travel so far and endure so long. There is humility in the clay itself. Fragile, yet durable enough to outlast empires. Fires that destroyed temples hardened archives. Floods sealed storerooms where clerks left their last accounts. When we read those lines, we are learning not only about gods, but about how people in difficult conditions built systems that endured. The modern legacy of the Anunnaki runs along 2 strands. One leads toward history, the first cities, the first ledgers, the first written attempts to bind justice to words. The other leads toward imagination, new stories shaped by present fears and hopes. Both strands now exist side by side, and together they show how ancient names continue to work on the modern mind. Both paths will endure. One remains rooted in clay, grammar, and patient comparison. The other drifts, reshaping itself to match the color of each new decade. The survival of the ancient name may depend on this dual life. A living culture finds new purposes for an old word, even when those who first spoke it would scarcely recognize the role. What matters is clarity. When a museum label tells you that a tablet preserves a hymn to Enlil, written in Sumerian and recopied centuries later in Akkadian, that is knowledge earned through care. When a late-night voice claims the same hymn conceals a blueprint for machinery, that is performance. Enjoy the spectacle, but do not cite it. The ancient authors deserve better. They constructed a world in words. A world that explained why cities rise and fail, why labor must be shared, and why promises carry weight beyond a single lifetime. They imagined a high council that fixed destinies, and later reimagined that council as judges below the earth. That alone is grandeur enough for any tradition. If you want a final proof that myth and science can rest together without friction, return to the planetarium after dark. The lights fade. The sky of a spring night above the lower rivers appears as it might have looked 4,000 years ago. The constellations feel unfamiliar, yet oddly close. The moon lifts itself above the horizon. A faint line traces Jupiter's path for that season. The guide recites an omen linking the bright god to harvest and wind. Then comes the explanation: retrograde motion, orbital geometry, the measured dance of worlds. Nothing is lost. The ancient line and the modern account sit together, like a bowl set carefully inside a brick shrine. The Anunnaki keep their place in memory. The sky keeps its wonder. We keep our hunger for both. Step into a quiet gallery where a single clay tablet rests on its stand. The distance between us and the first cities collapses. The marks are small, deliberate. An offering list. A hymn. A royal boast. Behind it stands a priest counting loaves at dawn, or a scribe repeating a line until its rhythm feels right. From such plain material, the people of the Riverlands built a map of the unseen and called it the work of the Anunnaki. It explained why days have structure and why rulers need restraint. It claimed that destinies are spoken in a court beyond human quarrels. It was spirituality designed for use, and that made it durable. These stories are not a pile of unrelated legends. They form a joined system. The separation of sky and earth gives order. The council of high gods grants weight to kingship and calendar alike. The creation of humanity addresses labor and justifies a society organized around canals and rations. The flood restores balance when growth exceeds the land's patience, then leaves a promise that life will continue within limits. The descent to the realm of the dead teaches that grief can be borne if the living remember. Each episode solves a civic problem and reshapes it into a story fit for festival and reflection. When we say myth, we often mean fantasy. In Mesopotamia, myth was also instruction. The me were not poetic ornaments. They were inventories of power, plowing, weaving, truth-telling, kingship. The Anunnaki were not whimsical figures. They were guarantors that decisions would echo across years, not just days. Even the grandest scenes carry a clerk's awareness of what must be counted. When Inanna brings culture home by boat, she delivers institutions. When a boundary stone invokes the High Court, it protects a field so a harvest can survive. This grounded clarity is why Mesopotamian myth traveled so easily. Merchants carried it upriver. Conquerors adapted it for new capitals. Scribes reassigned roles as cities rose and fell. The Hittites adopted elder gods confined below by a younger order. The Babylonians elevated a city god and charged him with setting the sky into measurable paths. Communities living along the same rivers shaped a flood story into a covenant with a single creator. Motifs crossed languages like caravans on reliable roads because the needs they answered, work, authority, loss, were shared. A modern reader can move between these traditions and watch an argument unfold across centuries. Why does power belong to some and not others? One culture says it descends from heaven. Another says it is earned by restoring order. Another binds it to justice and care for the vulnerable. The debate is long, civil, and written in story rather than statute. There is pleasure in how concrete the Mesopotamian vision remains, even at its most cosmic. Ziggurats are not abstractions. They are brick structures designed so a procession can be seen across a city. A calendar is not metaphysics. It is a schedule for canals and harvests, chanted so everyone arrives together. Omens do not erase choice. They train attention, urging leaders to look outward before acting. The Anunnaki sit above, yet never drift far from streets where millstones turn and barges scrape through locks. Their endurance comes from this balance. Feet on the ground. Eyes on the horizon. The myths admit danger and insist that the best answer is shared labor and public promises, witnessed by powers that outlast any one life. They name fate, but allow debate and mercy. They praise order without pretending it is free. Someone must clear the silt. Someone must sing the lament when a city falls. The stories honor those tasks. They also accept limits without despair. Mortality arrives after the flood not only as loss, but as a boundary that makes society possible. When the Anunnaki reappear in modern imagination as visitors from the stars or hidden patrons, we are repeating an old habit. We take an elder symbol of order and refit it to new anxieties. Sometimes that is playful. Sometimes it confuses wonder with evidence. Either way, the name persists because it still carries weight. Place it in a sentence and something vast stirs. The better use is the older one. Treat the Anunnaki as the name for a high council in a world convinced that the universe runs on rules cities must respect. Read a hymn to Enlil, then look at the plan of Nippur where petitions were heard. Read the flood story, then examine a band of silt in an excavation trench. Read a boundary curse, then walk a modern levee and feel why lines matter. These myths do not offer escape. They bind reality together with shared memory and careful language. They also encourage transparency. Decisions must be spoken aloud. Oaths require witnesses, human and divine. Rituals repeat on schedule. You might even say accountability begins here, in the belief that fate is not a whim, but a decree that can be heard, weighed, and remembered. Later laws and public festivals grow from this ground first stamped with wedge-shaped signs. So when you stand again before that small tablet, remember what it holds. A faith that time can be counted. A belief that work is a shared trust. A fear of flood and famine balanced by confidence that order can return. And the name of a council that guarantees words have force. The Anunnaki endure not because they glitter, but because the world still needs what they stand for. Strip away the gold masks and painted reliefs, and what remains is familiar: rain in season, children who live, labor that matters, and a fair hearing when trouble comes. The Anunnaki cycle is a long conversation about these things, a human attempt to make uncertainty bearable and the ordinary worthy of ceremony. It begins with work. The earliest poems do not romanticize toil. They admit irrigation is brutal and that someone must carry baskets. They then place that burden inside a story that offers dignity. Labor becomes participation in a design older than memory. A farmer standing on a levee at noon is no longer alone. A ration list becomes proof that one belongs. It moves to law. Swearing by the high court binds justice beyond mood or moment. A boundary tablet buried in the earth speaks for people not yet born. It preserves a field when memory fades. That foresight is remarkable. It faces grief. The afterlife is spare, yet the living refuse to abandon it. Names are spoken. Beer is poured. The judges below ensure that lives are weighed and remembered. In a world without modern medicine, that insistence is humane courage. It restrains power. Kings shine briefly, but legitimacy can leave them. A god walking out of a temple is a warning written in myth. Authority must answer to something older, and it trains attention. Omens urge observation, not panic. Today we call this risk assessment. The method may falter, but the posture endures. Act with care. Craft is honored. Brewing, weaving, music, carpentry, ranked alongside truth and victory. Skill sustains order. A sealed boat and a remembered song are acts of balance. Finally, there is restraint. After the flood, lives shorten so the world does not break under its own success. Limits become mercy. This is why these stories remain. They are not naive. They are seasoned. They know that order costs effort, that power needs limits, and that memory is a civic duty. When modern culture reshapes the Anunnaki, it is responding to that gravity. The old myths still ask the same questions we do. How do we share work? How do we bind power? How do we endure loss? They answered with clay, ritual, and story. And in doing so, they gave the world a language sturdy enough to last. Under that manual sits another chapter that the tablets imply without ever announcing. It is the chapter about listening. The Anunnaki do not shout their decrees from the clouds. They are consulted, questioned, petitioned, corrected. Omens are read and reread. Dreams are weighed against calendars. A bad sign can be postponed with the right ritual. A harsh verdict can be softened if the plea is properly made. The system assumes that meaning is negotiated over time. It teaches patience. It rewards attention. In a world where rivers wander and harvests argue with hope, listening is a survival skill. That habit carries forward into the craft of writing itself. Cuneiform is slow by design. A scribe presses, lifts, turns the stylus, presses again. Each mark requires intent. Errors are visible. Corrections leave scars. A tablet remembers the moment of hesitation when a hand paused to choose the next sign. When the Anunnaki appear in such texts, they arrive through this careful pace. The gods are shaped by a medium that insists on deliberation. That constraint matters. It is hard to imagine a reckless theology emerging from a script that refuses speed. Time thickens around these choices. Calendars grow precise. Intercalary months are debated. Festivals are scheduled to keep work and rest in balance. The Anunnaki are invoked to bless these adjustments, not because the heavens are fickle, but because human plans are. A council that oversees fate is also a council that authorizes revision. When a month is added to keep seasons aligned, it is not cheating. It is care. The sky does not mind. The fields insist. As centuries pass, the language shifts, but the work continues. Sumerian yields to Akkadian. Hymns are translated. Old names are paired with new titles. The Anunnaki become part of bilingual lists that explain equivalence without erasing difference. This is not confusion. It is administration. Empires require dictionaries. The gods comply. They accept aliases so that contracts can be honored across borders. The High Council adapts because the cities have learned to trade beyond their own canals. That adaptability becomes visible in ritual. Incantations from the first millennium call the Anunnaki as judges who can be summoned to resolve disputes between humans and the unseen. Illness is framed as a case. Misfortune is argued like a claim. The healer does not deny suffering. He names it, situates it, and asks the court to intervene. The logic is legal, not magical. It assumes that causes can be addressed when properly identified. The patient is not powerless. He has standing. You can feel the same confidence in the letters that cross the land. A governor writes to a king about shortages and unrest. He swears by the Anunnaki that his report is honest. The oath matters because it binds him to a record that others can check. If the grain arrives late, the letter will be read again. If the omens prove false, the ritual will be amended. Accountability runs through the system like a thread that refuses to snap. This is why the Anunnaki persist even as pantheons are rearranged. When Marduk rises, the council does not vanish. It reorganizes. Lists are redrawn. Precedence is clarified. The old names are retained as offices within a larger order. The city that manages canals and courts finds it natural to imagine the heavens doing the same. Cosmic politics mirror civic ones, not because the sky copies the street, but because the street needs a model that makes sense of shared effort. The material record confirms this intimacy between idea and practice. Seals show banquet scenes where gods and humans share space according to rank. Boundary stones carve curses and blessings with equal care. Foundation deposits place small figurines beneath walls, asking the council to watch what cannot be seen. These are not gestures of fear. They are habits of maintenance. A city is a machine that needs lubrication. Ritual is one kind of oil. When the machine fails, the response is not denial. It is story. The flood tale does not pretend that order is permanent. It admits catastrophe and asks how to live after. The answer is covenant and measurement. Limits are set. Signs are placed in the sky to mark seasons and remind survivors of restraint. The Anunnaki are present as witnesses to this agreement, not as villains or saviors. They guarantee memory. That role is humble and immense at once. The humility becomes clearer when you notice what the myths do not do. They do not promise escape from work. They do not erase death. They do not grant universal prosperity. They offer continuity instead. A child will learn the same signs his grandfather learned. A canal will be cleared again. A festival will return next year if the city endures. The council presides over repetition. That is its gift. Modern readers sometimes mistake repetition for stagnation. The tablets suggest otherwise. Innovation appears everywhere. New tools, new laws, new forms of prayer. The Anunnaki do not freeze culture. They authorize change within bounds. A reform text from Lagash shows a ruler invoking the gods to roll back abuses and reset weights and measures. Justice here is not abstract. It is a recalibration. The council approves because fairness has drifted. The drift is visible in the ground. Salinity creeps into fields. Canals silt up. Neighborhoods are abandoned. The response is technical and ritual. Engineers redirect water. Priests schedule appeasement. Scribes record the attempt. When a quarter fails, the failure is studied. A city that names its gods as judges is a city that expects reasons. This expectation survives the fall of cities themselves. Libraries move. Tablets are recopied. Students learn obsolete signs because the old words still matter. Ashurbanipal's collectors gathered texts from across the land, not to fossilize them, but to keep them usable. A ritual copied in Nineveh might solve a problem in Haran. The Anunnaki travel because their jurisdiction does. Travel changes them. In some texts they fade into the background as more specialized deities take the stage. In others they return as a collective invoked at moments of crisis. The oscillation is telling. When life is stable, specialization thrives. When life is strained, councils reassemble. The pattern feels familiar to anyone who has lived through emergencies. If you step back far enough, the whole tradition reads like a long experiment in governance. What do you do when power concentrates? You invent judges. What do you do when memory fails? You write. What do you do when nature overwhelms? You plan, rebuild, and tell stories that teach restraint. The Anunnaki are not the experimenters. They are the framework that makes the experiment legible. That legibility is what modern culture keeps reaching for, even when it misreads the terms. Conspiracy thrives on the idea of hidden councils because councils imply coherence. The fear is not of gods, but of order that excludes. Ancient texts are more candid. They show councils that can be petitioned and corrected. They assume that participation matters. A citizen brings offerings. A king brings reforms. A priest brings careful words. Access is structured, not sealed. This difference matters. It reminds us that the old system was not about secrecy, but about process. Knowledge was public enough to be taught in schools. Rituals were shared enough to be recognized across cities. The Anunnaki did not hoard meaning. They anchored it. Anchors are heavy. They slow movement. They prevent drift. In a delta, that weight is welcome. The land teaches you to value anything that holds. Mud bricks dissolve. Reeds rot. Clay tablets endure. The gods named on those tablets inherit the same durability. They last because they are written into practices that make sense. Sense is the quiet achievement here. The myths do not overwhelm with spectacle. They explain why a promise binds, why a calendar matters, why a curse frightens, why mercy is necessary. They make a case for civilization as a moral project. The Anunnaki sit at the center not as tyrants, but as clerks of fate, keeping minutes on the long meeting between humans and their environment. You can still feel that meeting when you stand where canals meet fields. Watch farmers argue about water turns. Listen to elders recall floods by naming years. Notice how contracts are still sworn and witnessed. The names have changed. The gestures persist. A hand raised. A line signed. A meal shared to seal the deal. These are the descendants of older acts. The tablets do not ask us to believe in gods. They ask us to notice systems. They invite us to see how language, labor, and law intertwine. The Anunnaki are the figure that holds that braid together. Remove them and the strands still exist, but the pattern loosens. So the continuation of the story is not a revelation, but a practice. Read carefully. Count honestly. Repair what breaks. Leave room for mercy. Remember the dead. Teach the young. Mark the seasons. Share the load. Accept limits. Petition authority. Revise when needed. Keep records. Tell stories that remind you why these things matter. The first cities learned these lessons in mud and heat. They encoded them in myth because myth travels farther than instructions. The Anunnaki were the carriers. They moved the message across centuries and languages without insisting on belief, only attention. That is why the tablets still speak. not because they whisper secrets, but because they articulate a way of living together that remains unfinished. The council is still in session. The minutes are still being written. And every time we choose to treat work as shared, law as accountable, and limits as gifts, we add a line to a record that began when someone pressed a stylus into wet clay and named the high court that would watch. And now, as the story loosens its grip, there is no need to carry it any farther. The Anunnaki do not ask to be remembered with urgency. They remain patient. They understand that meaning settles slowly, like silt after a river's rise. What mattered was never the names alone, but the rhythm they taught: to pause, to measure, to share, and to repair. Those lessons have already done their work if you feel the world growing quieter around you. The cities that first spoke these myths have long returned to Earth, but the habits they shaped still move through our days. We still gather, still argue, still set limits and forgive breaches. We still hope that fairness can be named, that effort can be seen, that time will make room for rest. In this way, the old council has not vanished. It has simply dispersed, living on wherever people choose balance over excess and memory over noise. So let the tablets close for the night. Let the rivers slow in your mind. Imagine the lamps of an ancient city dimming one by one, courtyards settling into shadow, the last voices fading into a shared silence. Nothing more is required of you now. The story has been told, and it will keep itself. Thank you for spending this quiet time with Noctivara Stories. May your thoughts drift gently, your breathing grow even, and your rest come easily. Wherever you are, and whenever sleep finds you, good night.